I didn't know that you had North Korean investors in your first company. That's wild. Was that hard? Welcome. Oh, we're live. Welcome to Technology Brothers, the most profitable podcast in the world. Today, we are doing a deep dive on a classic Peter Thiel talk at South by Southwest, back when South by Southwest rocked. It's called You Are Not a Lottery Ticket, and it's a big discussion of luck versus skill and hard work, and a bunch of amazing frameworks came out of this. Most people know this, but I think even if you've seen it and you haven't seen it in a while, you're still going to get a lot out of this because we're going to take it in a bunch of different directions, give you the high level, give you a bunch of analysis, and see how all of his predictions played out a decade later. So let's start off with...
Wait, before we get into that,
yeah,
I just wanted to highlight one of our own posts. We spent a lot of time highlighting other people's posts, and we wanted to highlight a post that's near and dear to our heart, which is a simple post, a low-tam banger, where we said last week we fucking love podcasting, and we're trying not to swear too much because we want our children to be able to listen to this.
It's also just low class and vulgar.
Swearing is low class and vulgar, but every once in a while we slip up. We slipped up this post, but we just wanted to say John and I really enjoy podcasting, and we're glad that people listen to the show, but we'd still be doing it even without any listeners. We'd still be
100%.
recording, putting it out. So anyways, we're grateful to get to do this, and thank you
to the listeners.
Thank you to everybody that's actually tuning in and participating in this cultural movement towards technological progress.
Yeah. So let's kick it off with You Are Not a Lottery Ticket. The core question that Peter is asking is, to what extent is success in startups and life driven by luck versus skill, planning, or effort? The traditional perspective is luck can be overcome or influenced by hard work, but there is a contemporary bias that success is often seen as a function of random context, the lucky sperm club or birth circumstances. And Peter aims to debunk this, and he has a whole host of great examples asking the question, was it luck or not? It's always hard to say when you go back and look at these narratives. Elon Musk went from PayPal to start SpaceX and Tesla, Jack Dorsey with Square and Twitter, Steve Jobs with Apple and Pixar. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I'm a great believer in luck, and I find the harder I work, the more of it I have," suggesting that it is something that you can overcome. Samuel Goodwin said, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And I think that no matter what you think about luck, it's worth redefining it.
Yep.
And thinking about it as as something that is a product of all the hard work.
Yep.
My working definition of luck is something that it is the reward for incredible networking, independent thinking, and relentless work ethic.
Yep.
In contrast, today's dominant view is that success stems from the whole context, which is random. Maybe you were a member of the lucky sperm club, the lucky egg club. Maybe you're lucky where you were born, and that's what drives everything. There's a version of this that applies to startups. The successful ones were accidental, and it's pretty clear how big a role luck plays.
Yeah, it's funny. Being born and raised in California, I from a young age had a sense of how lucky that was, because I feel like I would travel and people globally would tell me, "Oh, I can't believe you're from California. I've always wanted to visit there." And then when they could, they would do whatever they could to go visit.
Yep.
And the thing about tech that's interesting is doesn't matter. Like a lot of the most successful people in tech were born far from the golden land of California and made the effort to move here.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't, being born here, maybe you have some level of advantage, but you can create luck by simply moving to California.
Yeah. I always love the story of the founder of Discord, Jason Citron. He grew up, I think, in Florida, in not even a major city, and then went to a college that was like a trade school for video game development, and then started one company, and I don't think it went anywhere, but there's this old video of him demoing it at TechCrunch Disrupt, and then finally figured it out with Discord, and has just built a beast of a business.
Yeah.
And was clearly just built differently. But Peter starts off by explaining that there's a difference between going from 0 to 1 and going from 1 to n. And so he has an X and Y axis chart. 0 to 1 is technology, doing new things. It's vertical. 1 to n is globalization. It's copying existing things, and it's horizontal. And this will echo through the rest of the presentation. And there's a very interesting conversation in here where he says, I agree with Paul Graham on a lot of things, but I think this is a place where we just automatically channel our society's default bias, and it's worth asking how much of this is true and how much of it is not. And we discussed on a previous show this idea that maybe the advice of PG and the advice of Peter Thiel are actually at odds in many ways.
So like talk to customers versus call your shot.
Exactly. Yeah. And it goes into the way that they've tried the concentration strategies, where Peter will try and be, Anderl series C, A, D. I think they just put more money in the latest round, which I don't even know what the letter is, F or G. And it's just concentration, whereas YC has been diversify.
Yep.
And, they both worked, but they're very different strategies. And so there's been this, shift in cultural attitude. In the past, luck would be was something to be mastered, overcome by effort and vision. But in the present, success is seen as heavily dependent on uncontrollable external factors, and that makes you very docile, and it makes you very just indeterminate, which is something he'll go on to define.
And there's a line from Peter, something about failure is not valuable at all. Like it doesn't matter that you don't like pat yourself on the back being like, I learned a bunch, because you could have failed in like 50 other ways. You just happen to fail that one way. And it matters a lot more of like how you actually won. Right.
No, I love that one. And so Peter starts breaking down the whole crux of this "you are not a lottery ticket" speech is about this 2x2 matrix with 4 boxes, and it defines 2 axes. On the y-axis, we have optimistic versus pessimistic. How do you feel the future will play out? And then on the x-axis, you have determinant versus indeterminate. And so he uses a number of different examples. Maybe we should start with the general category. So in the optimistic determinant category, you have engineering and art. You believe that you can change the world, you could believe you can do something, but you have to go and instantiate it yourself. In the optimistic indeterminate category, you have finance and law, which are tracked and heavily diversified. In the determined pessimistic scenario, you have wartime rationing, and in indeterminate pessimistic, you have insurance. Something bad is going to happen, and you're creating a safety net. And then he also maps this to eras in geopolitics. And so in the U.S., in the United States, between the 50s and 60s, when we were going to the moon, we were extremely optimistic, but extremely determinate. We realized, JFK stands up and says, why do we climb mountains? Because they're there. Why do we go to the moon? Because we choose to go to the moon, and we did. And the indeterminate optimist is what the U.S. has fallen into currently, where the government doesn't build anything anymore. It's all just wealth transfers. And Peter calls out this fascinating concept of the government doesn't know what to do with the money, so they just give it to people. And then the people don't know what to do with the money, so they put it in index funds. And then the index funds don't know what to do with the money, so they give it to companies that then they diversify. And then the companies don't know what to do with money,
so they
give a dividend.
My favorite, the optimism of the California government that we're just going to build this like high-speed rail line and then spend billions of dollars barely going a mile. That's sort of the...
And that's one of the greatest segments. I mean, Peter's always good at like keeping a very high level theoretical framework that he's breaking down, but then grounding it in a bunch of historical examples. And I love these. He talks about to illustrate what determinate optimism looks like, we can consider historical examples. The construction of the Transcontinental Railroad in the 19th century was a radically different future, connecting the entire country. By today's standards, no one would do it. People would say it cost too much, but at the time, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another example is Robert Moses in the mid-20th century New York, who built parks, roads, and infrastructure. There were many specific plans for a bigger, better future. It stopped in the mid-1960s when people questioned whether building another highway was really better. Once there was no longer a definite view of the future, no one could build anything new. Nothing major has been built in New York City since then in any meaningful scale. And the last one is crazy because it's in California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. It never happened, but the Weber plan in the late 40s, building dams, freshwater lakes, and a 32-lane highway. It was a radically definite view of the future. Such a plan is unimaginable today. He was a school teacher. He wasn't even some
Chad.
Yeah, and he was an amateur theater producer, and he could propose such a grand plan, and it was taken seriously enough for congressional hearings.
Yep.
Today, these sorts of grand, definite visions don't exist.
So another example here that's interesting. So there's some terraforming projects happening in the Middle East and potentially happening in parts of Africa where they're basically trying to divert large swaths or basically turn like desert land into lakes and rivers and things of that nature. And so this guy gave this great talk on it. And one of the areas that he identified was potentially able to be terraformed was there was this place called the Salton Sea outside of Palm Springs that used to be a lake. And I believe it was the Colorado River was diverted at one point, and it ceased to basically, and it just evaporated over time. And I asked the guy who gave the talk, how would you actually make this happen? And he's like, oh, I have no idea.
Yeah.
And it would take an extremely determinant plus optimistic view to actually get something like this done, because if you just say, oh, we should terraform the Salton Sea and return it to being this lake because it'll create all this agricultural land surrounding it, it's not gonna happen unless there's like this very, very intentional approach from a large number of people to say like, this is really hard, we're gonna do it. Like, we're not gonna just like hope that it happens, we're gonna make it happen.
Yeah, the terraforming stuff is fascinating because there are entrepreneurs who are talking about this. Like Augustus, I went out to the Salton Sea with him. And,
oh, really?
Oh, yeah. And we filmed a whole video, and he's talked about that. And Mike Solana wrote a piece about it a long time ago. But it's just not culturally taken seriously at all.
Yeah.
And all of those projects are laughed at.
Yeah.
If you look at top YouTube results for Elon Musk's tunnel project, the Boring Company, it's all photos of Elon with a red clown nose on. And it's just somebody who is not a scientist at all, just a YouTuber, just laughing at how preposterous this is, how it will never work, how there are better solutions. And it gets millions and millions of views.
For every 100 feet of tunnel, he could put 20 kids through school or whatever.
And it's just shuffling the chips around the board endlessly. And it's like, okay, like people always say, oh, well, like we should just build bike lanes. It's like, okay, like yes, and let's also do the tunnels, and let's do the bike lanes, and let's also do bus lanes, and let's also do planes that are supersonic. Let's do it all.
Yeah.
And that's not the vision of a lot of people that are pessimistic and a lot of people that are indeterminate. And so it's the same thing with the Dubai projects. I mean, I find myself even like laughing at like the idea of the line and like how crazy that is, or Dubai building like these incredibly like insane like islands that are man-made. All of that, it's hard to resist the urge because there's such a cultural pull from just like.
Isn't it interesting though? In many ways, the Gulf, the GCC, countries are very determinate and optimistic. They're like, not only are we going to buy the PGA, but we're going to terraform this part of our country, and we're going to build this city on a line that like looks like it's pulled out of the future. And so it in many ways, it's playing out over the world. It almost takes a monarchy to bring that approach to governance today, or very, very, very strong leadership. Yeah.
I love this framework. I mean, obviously, like the quadrant model is very important, and Peter breaks it down in a bunch of different ways. He shows the different philosophers that fit into these coordinates. So Hegel and Marx are in the determined optimist quadrant. Determined pessimists are Plato and Aristotle. Indeterminate optimist are Rawls and Nozick, and then pessimistic indeterminate is Epicurus and Lucretius. And I remember when I first got on Twitter, there was a guy, the Epicurean dealmaker, who wrote about Wall Street, and seeing this, it's kind of like it's all clicking about his worldview. And he was like a little bit pessimistic in finance, and that's why his account grew, because he was always pouring cold water on things, but he was also very much like, you know, the broad diversified investor. not saying, I mean, even Michael Burry is pessimistic, but determinant.
Yeah.
Michael Burry is saying, we need to short this exact thing right now.
Yeah.
And he's wrong a lot, but, you know, every once in a while.
What's the phrase? Pessimists sound smart, optimists make money, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Investing.
Yeah, it's clout versus wealth.
Yeah.
And I love this other frame, just simplifying it just to what's the difference between determinant and indeterminate, so you can really put your finger on it. Determinant is substantive, and indeterminate is process based. So when you hear someone talking about what their business is or what they're doing, and they're talking about the process that they're working on, that's a signal that they don't have a concrete vision and they're running a playbook instead of actually thinking independently and building something specific. And so Peter goes on to break it down in a bunch of different realms. In finance terms, the determinant optimistic is invest in concrete projects and engineering. And this is like a lot of his investments: Anduril, SpaceX, Airbnb, Stripe, Rippling, Ramp. All these companies are very concrete changes in the worldview. How will the world work after this gets built? Heavy on engineering. The indeterminate optimist is low savings, low investment, rely on indexes and diversification. The whole efficient market theory is very much propagating that idea. And then indeterminate pessimistic is high savings, fearful, no plan, insurance-based mindset. And that goes to China, where they do operate very aggressively, but towards a scarcity mindset for sure. So there's implications for society and business. In indeterminate optimism, you do nothing specific. You have minimal savings, minimal targeted investment. Without a vision, money becomes an end itself, accumulated but not invested in big ideas. Nothing changes. It's zero sum. And real interest rates go negative because no one knows what to do with cash. And this was the famous fight that Peter got in with Eric Schmidt over at Google, saying, you are out of ideas. You don't know how to innovate. You have $50 billion on your balance sheet. You should easily be able to invest that in something productive. But the fact that you can't, just the fact that it's on your balance sheet, tells me that I've already won this debate. And it's like one of the most like famous debates in Silicon Valley, in my opinion, because he just had him dead to rights. He had him dead to rights. And Eric was so used to arguing like the TED Talk, like philosophy way of, we shareholders and we want to be prudent with this stuff. And there's a bunch of good reasons for why we're doing this. And we're waiting maybe, but it was like the sign of a pattern.
Gotcha.
And I think he clocked it correctly. And it's one of the greatest moments. If you're ever hanging out with Peter, bring that up. He loves it. He loves it. I tried to make it happen again. I wanted a round 2 debate because I think Eric has evolved a lot, and I think that they would have a great
Maybe we should have a TV debates product where we get, because we're a pretty neutral party. We try to tell it how it is, and we're conflicted in many ways due to our investments, but we try to keep things generally aligned, but having a debate stage and being able to run back version 2.0 of that would be great.
Yeah. He even pulls it to literature. We've moved from definite science fiction futures like 2001: A Space Odyssey to ones that are static or unchanging like Neuromancer, Blade Runner, 1984. It's fascinating seeing like how the sci-fi has instantiated these different ideas of what the world looks like, whether it's an optimistic scenario or negative in the future. Like we need positive sci-fi. That's clear. Hilariously, that Stallone movie, what's it called? I'm blanking, with Wesley Snipes. It's called, I'm completely blanking on it. It came up on a previous show, but it's fascinating. They predicted like all the self-driving cars, also Demolition Man. Great movie. And so he starts to close it out with talking about startups and innovation. The official religion of today is that everything is statistical, luck-driven, and incremental. You need to A/B test your way to success. You need short-term horizons. And I'm sure you've seen that with like brand development and marketing campaigns, is that A/B testing is like the very last segment of this. And in general, you need a unique idea. It's the era of the ideas guy.
Yeah.
Like John Fio is not A/B testing his way to coming up with a new idea.
The only thing he does is use the Instagram polls product.
Oh, he does?
That he does collect data.
That's
that
great.
way.
I love it.
If you're building consumer products, copy Fio and leverage Instagram polls to gather feedback. It works well.
Yeah. And he tells this great example. I mean, he highlights that Apple under Steve Jobs, they had a multi-year vision, very definite optimism.
Yep.
The smartphone will be the dominant platform. Let's put an immense amount of R&D resources towards this, spend years getting it perfect. Don't release it until the screen can be glass, because I don't want my phone scratched by my keys. And Steve apparently just came in one day and was like, my demo phone is getting scratched. It has to be glass. Go figure it out.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that you probably could have run some study and found that, oh, well, like the customers will still buy it, so we don't need to do it, and it's more expensive, but he had a vision. And then the best example, which I still love so much and such a great bull signal, if you can pull this out of a founder and they're not lying to you, is Facebook's refusal to sell to Yahoo for $1 billion in 2006, which is like literally a year after the company started. They walk into a board meeting, and it's Peter and Zuck and I believe Jim Breyer over at Excel, and Mark's just like, well, this will be a quick board meeting. Like, obviously we have to formally discuss this, but we're obviously not taking this deal. And Peter and Jim are like, we should probably talk about it, right? Like, we should probably there's a lot of money.
At least 5 minutes.
You own 25% of the company. There's a lot that you could do with $250 million. Like, this is a reasonable thing. And Mark was like, but I don't know what I would do with the money. I would just start another social network, and I kind of like the one I have. Like, why would I do this? And so eventually, they talk about it and they pass. And looking backwards, Peter realized that it'd be somewhat unscientific to do this analysis. But if you looked backwards at all the companies, every time someone refused $1 billion offer, eBay, Google, it had turned out to be right. More importantly, Facebook's refusal.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's interesting, because there's a lot of companies that don't take the $100 million option to sell and then end up regretting it.
Yep.
I do feel like there's a ton of. We don't need to say them on the
on
the show, but you'll meet guys that still kick themselves for not selling when they had a deal on the table because the next year things soured or whatever. But for some reason, if somebody's willing to pay $1 billion for something, there's probably some real
also
magic.
The quality of the acquirer. You're talking about if a founder mode company is making you $1 billion offer, a significant portion of their market cap, it's a signal that you're onto something really, really serious, as opposed to, some strategic, public company was going to write us $100 million check, but they're a $100 billion company. And I didn't even talk to the CEO because it was such a small deal for them. You should probably take that because they're not evaluating it properly. Yeah. Whereas if Zuck is taking you on a walk and being like, hey, here's $1 billion. You should really come work with us. You might be really putting the screws to him in a few years. And I think we kind of saw the counter of that play out with Instagram, which could have been huge.
Nikita's company too.
Yeah.
Zuck was worried.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a bunch of takeaways here. Purely luck-driven or incremental approaches may not yield breakthrough innovation. Having a definite idea of the future can guide bold investments in enduring companies. The best future, a determinate, optimistic approach where big visions drive real progress and transcend mere luck. Including thought, overcome luck by defining and working towards a radically better, definite future. And he quotes with, not just a static future like a dead channel on TV, but a definite future that's radically better. Yeah,
and one of my favorite parts of this actually is not even Peter's thinking. It's just Thomas Jefferson quote, I'm a great believer in luck. I find the harder I work, the more I have of it. And I think that having that definite vision, but understanding it's not enough to just have the vision, right? Look at Augustus. He's got a very clear vision of what he wants to execute towards, but he's also putting in 14, 15-hour days every single day. So it's that balance of you can overcome luck, but you also want it to work in your favor. So just work harder. Yeah, the reason I actually pulled this up, the reason this resurfaced was because I had a friend who is considering joining the government and was doing kind of an informational interview with one of the partners at Founders Fund, and was like, how should I go into this interview and get advice? And I was like, the most important thing is figure out what you want in life, where you want to be. It's the classic question of where do you see yourself in 10 years? And that's such a silly played out question that we stopped asking it, but it's actually incredibly important to ask that question. And so go do some thinking. And I often find it's useful to go back to what did you want to do as a child? Yeah.
Because maybe after you get past astronaut, there might be something serious there.
Astronaut, influencer. What's the next
What's
thing?
the next one? And there's probably a moment when you were like, yeah, I actually wasn't dreaming of being a lawyer. I was dreaming of being, a business person or something else, or building something or doing something. And I remember when I interviewed at Founders Fund, I got on a call with Trey. And towards the end, he was like, yeah, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, kind of giving him a wishy-washy answer. And he was like, you can just tell me. Like, and it was like very informative. It was like, he kind of like beat me over the head with like,
I want
it's
to be
okay.
the number one technology podcaster in the world.
Yeah. And just, and I mean, honestly, I hadn't really figured it out at the time.
Yeah.
But it's a very, very good framework. And I think people need permission to just say out loud what they have deep in their mind.
So many questions like where do you see yourself in 10 years? That got kind of canceled for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Because it was like, oh, well, some people just want a job or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the question, you got in trouble for asking people, what do you do at parties?
Okay.
Because it's like, you remember this? Like,
no,
it was
not
like,
really.
Have something more interesting to say than what do you do? And for me, asking somebody, what's your story? What do you do?
Yeah.
That is if I'm meeting somebody for the first time, I'm trying to understand who they are. That's probably some of the best information I can get.
Yeah.
So they're going to choose what they want to share, and then that will say something by itself.
Yeah. I mean, asking someone like, tell me your life story feels like kind of cringe, but that's
cringe.
But I think that I think that if you can pull that out of someone, like that's the most interesting thing that they have to say.
Yeah.
And if they can actually, a lot of people will just kind of give you the resume, but if you can actually get like the highs and lows and like all the problems that they solved throughout their life, like that's very interesting and a good way to get to know someone.
Yeah.
And I feel like we got there like in our like first meeting. It was like we were very open and like actually telling the truth about like the full arc of our careers, which I think was
totally.
Good. But yeah,
I remember.
I mean,
I actually remember when we first met. I was like, "Wait, so do you want to be like president or something?" I didn't really. I don't. We're all figuring it out at the time. But I was like, "Is this guy gonna be like the mayor of Pasadena, governor of California,
maybe
president?"
I mean, podcast hosts have run for content before.
It's a clear playbook now.
It's a clear playbook. Reagan was an actor.
Yeah.
Trump had a reality TV show. The next president will be a podcaster. Why not?
Yeah, the bodybuilder to governor pipeline.
Fantastic.
Strong.
Also movie star.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to be able to communicate. But yeah, think really hard. I know even outside of the Thielverse, this guy who runs Strauss Zelnick, he runs Take-Two Interactive. They make GTA and
cool.
a ton of video games. And he takes like an immense amount of like coaching calls from people. He makes himself very available. He wrote a book just called Success. It's private. It's
I wrote the
published.
book. I wrote the book I wrote the book Success.
Yeah. And he wrote it when he was young too.
Yeah.
It was crazy. And this guy has a badass career, but you can only get it by emailing him, and he sends you a copy. It's not published. Like you can't get it anywhere.
Great.
It's amazing. And in there, he will always just start with like, what do you want? Because if you don't want to be the CEO, like you'll never get there. If you don't want to be a founder, you'll never be there. Like and figuring that out and being honest with yourself. So the exercise is usually like that ikigai thing. Like what are you good at? What makes money? What do you love doing? Find the intersection of that. Then be honest with yourself about what that is. Because if you're the best dentist in the world, you're going to wind up building a massive dental empire. If you're the best pottery artist in the world, like you will, but you have to excel. Instead of just being, okay, I happen to like, dentistry and I'm just going to do it to pay the bills and I never have any ambition. Like become an entrepreneur still in whatever field you're excelling in.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that talk. It's one of the best.
Good one.
Go watch it. If you haven't watched it, it's fantastic. It goes way deeper than we went. Welcome back to Technology Brothers, still the most profitable podcast in the world. We have some DMs, some Q&A from the fans. Let's go to Pete Campbell. He says, Dear Tech Bros Pod.
Not the fans, the brothers.
The brothers. Let's go to the brothers. Pete Campbell says, Dear Tech Bros Pod, can you think of anyone more accomplished or deserving to deliver next year's Stanford commencement speech than Gary Tan? I can't. That's a fantastic idea. And
Great
I don't
idea.
know if you thought of this yourself, Pete, but we should definitely get this trending. We love Gary.
Gary went on a campaign to save San Francisco. Pete is going on a campaign to get Gary to do the Stanford.
I mean, Gary's too humble.
speech.
He would never lobby for himself for this, but this would be a fantastic fit, I think.
And pretty good marketing for Y Combinator.
For sure.
Event marketing moment.
Yep.
You know, talking to a bunch of Stanford grads. Hey, by the way, I run a small accelerator called Y Combinator. You know, a few times a year we give a number of startups.
Yeah.
A little bit of money.
that was a thing when I got to Silicon Valley. Every big shot would come in, and they loved being like, well, I got to Silicon Valley, and then I started working for a little company called Yahoo. and we started like hearing it again and again. And we were like, this is such a played out like meme. Like every VC loves saying like, yeah, I went to a little company called Microsoft.
It's like saying like I was one of the first 100 employees, but it sounds cooler to be like, yeah, I worked for a little company.
And then you're all like, you were just like some product manager. And then you go to their house and it's like a $50 million mansion in Menlo Park or something. And you're like, okay, it's real. The Yahoo money was wild. Like, those guys made a lot of money early. It's great. Anyway, let's move on. We got another question.
Good idea, Pete.
From Tyler. He says, help, Tech Bros Pod. I'm looking for a book that covers the intersection of brand history, technical innovation, and collecting watches. Give your take. I'll make a specific recommendation, and we'll go from there.
So you don't need to read books on brand history. You can just listen to Founders podcasts.
True.
So you can go listen to 50, 100 episodes back to back, just block off like a few weeks and do that. And then the other categories, I would just say, I think one of the most underrated things that you can do is if you're interested in a topic, read parts of a few different books in the category. Like you don't even need to, the whole trap of having to read the entire book. Like it's totally fine to just read some number of pages. And if you get bored, just like go on to the next thing.
Kind of skip around.
Yeah, or skip around. But yeah, just like read the top 5 books on watches.
That's good. And I have a specific recommendation for you. It's a book on the history of Rolex, and there is a fantastic episode of Founders, 351. I'll just play you the intro here.
The book I'm going to talk to you about today is nearly impossible to find. It was first published in 1946. There's only 1,000 copies ever made. It's called Rolex Jubilee, and then the subtitle is actually in Latin, but when you translate it from Latin into English, it literally means "go with me." And so it's a tiny 4-volume history of Rolex.
Very nice.
Volume 1 was written by Hans Wilsdorf, who is the founder of Rolex.
So go listen to episode 351 of Founders. Maybe pick up the book, try and get a copy. I think that will probably hit all 3 of these. And lastly, just keep listening to the podcast, man. We're doing
our best
covering all
here.
3 of these every single day.
We're trying to give a proper analysis of every business ever because we love business.
Yeah.
So in the total history of Technology Brothers, we hope to cover every business at least once, even if it's just one promoted post.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to Based Baron. He says, yeah, I'm Polly. Polly going to beat the shit out of some EA teapot post-rat godless virgin if they get up in my grill on this app one more time. And very funny post.
Got him.
Getting in fights. We wanted to highlight Based Baron because he claims to be an analyst at Tech Bros Pod. He's not officially affiliated with us, but we're always open to supporters. But as we reviewed your timeline, Based Baron, maybe a little bit too based, a little bit too negative. We want to keep the momentum up, keep the optimism. Don't want to be the definite pessimist on this show. You want to be optimistic. And a lot of the things you're saying, a lot of the shit you're talking, not unreasonable, but where's it going to get you?
Yeah.
Pessimists get clout. Yeah. Optimists get rich.
The key, so Base Baron, seemingly in group, emerging poster. It's got some good takes. Got some takes that are kind of trying to take down some of our buddies. Things like that. But here's what I'd say: Based Baron, you want to get to the point where 2 years from now, when you got 100,000 followers, you're allowed to share who you really are without burning a bunch of bridges. Because at the trajectory that he's posting, he's going there for sure. He's going to 100K.
For sure.
That said, you got to make sure to not make too many enemies along the way so that when you do that big face reveal, it's like you're sort of confident in doing that and not, attacking too many people. And
people will have, 2 levels of reaction to an account like this. The first one is like, haha, like dunking on all the, the lol cows of tech. And are you familiar with lol cow?
No.
It's a person that is milked for lulls. Because they're so downtrodden that the whole, like, it's from 4chan, so the 4chan community will pick someone who they just like laugh at endlessly, and they just like anything that they do, they're just like getting dunked on, and then it creates this really vicious cycle. But it's all related to the bucket of crabs theory. Are you familiar with this?
Yeah.
So yeah, the crabs, they pull each other down, and as soon as one is about to escape the bucket, the rest of them get pulled down. If they were just working together, they could lift each other up. And so level 1 is like, okay, yeah, this guy's funny. He's got some good dunks. He's talking trash. He's naming names. He's unhinged. That's great. But level 2 is like, you're revealing that your financials are not intertwined with 25,000 different startups.
Yeah, you're
and
not
organizations.
conflicted enough.
Not enough conflicts of interest.
Yep.
Not enough conflicts of interest. Call us once you've LP'd into 25 different funds and can't talk shit about anyone anymore because you're a bag holder on even the worst companies.
Yeah.
And so you wouldn't say a word.
Bright future-based Baron.
Yeah.
And you'll definitely we'll ship you the JD when we open up the analyst role.
Fantastic. Sure. Fantastic. Let's go to Dan Gray. He says, why are so many startups pitching the same ideas? This is the result of startup catering, where founders work on the problems they believe VCs care about rather than problems they are connected to. It occurs whenever there is a strong and vocal consensus among investors on the opportunity of the day, e.g. agents, vertical AI, gaming, etc. Obviously, this is a negative influence on innovation. The purpose of startups is to build novel solutions which others are unable to anticipate. Consequently, the best VCs focus at most on broad problem areas rather than solutions. Yeah, interesting. This is something where like it's
Very
always
well
like
said.
it's always like the bear case for like the YC request for startups. It's like, are the best founders, do they need that, or are they already building it? I've built 2 companies that like didn't fit into any trends at all, and that's been good, but also extremely painful because I haven't been able to just flip them to Meta for $100 million in a year. But
Extremely painful.
Extremely painful, but it's all worked out. And you got to have the definite optimist view of the world, and oftentimes that also coincides with the contrarian vision and seeing something different and having everyone tell you that you're wrong for years. And this was the case with Coinbase and Airbnb and Stripe. Oh, why are you doing this? Something already exists. It's unnecessary. This isn't trendy.
The positive about the YC requests for startups is if you're working at a FANG and you see that and you're like, oh, that's interesting. And then that catalyzes you into starting a company. And then you start that company and maybe you end up pivoting to something else. Like at least it provided that initial activation energy to get you to go and do it. But yeah, I've seen this so much just as an angel investor, seeing people come pitch me an idea and I'm like, you're hitting all the right buzzwords, but yeah, it's not an original idea. Yeah. I've seen a bunch of other pitches for it. And then there's no reason why that you should win versus anyone else that's doing this. Yep. In fact, it's usually the opposite. It's like, well, you picked this idea because you thought you could raise a $2 million seed round and like basically play founder.
Yeah. And a lot of times you're a year too late, or there's some company that's more well-funded in stealth mode, or you're just like, you're just behind the ball.
Yeah.
Let's do a promoted post.
Promoted post.
I'm excited for this one.
We love promoting the fantastic inventory over at DuPont Registry. Today we're talking about a 2017 Lamborghini Centenario Roadster, one of only 20 produced. It has a very modest asking price of only $2.9 million. Great spec. Things in white on black. It's got a nice wing on it.
Killer.
And just like you can tell when something's been spec'd properly, and this was very intentional, not over the top. And it's got a nice like aero kit on it, and they're just not making Lamborghinis like this anymore. And this is 1 of 20. So pick this up. This
great
looks
for
like
the
a great
crypto VC, great for the GP, greatest street park in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Make a statement.
Yeah, and don't buy this if you live in Miami. Buy this if you live in SF.
Exactly.
This is a great daily.
Yeah.
If you're going to be stuck in front of behind a Waymo.
Yeah.
And you're sandwiched by Waymos, you want to be in a white Lamborghini Centenario Roadster, just to mog the people that are filming the steering wheel, being like, "Oh, I'm a Waymo! Look, it's turning by itself," and you're like, "Yeah, it turns, when I do it." So.
Yeah. I want to hear some noise complaints in Menlo Park and Los Altos.
Yeah.
In Incline Village, let's tear it up out there.
And if you need some driving lessons, MKBHD.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
His videos aren't explicitly driving lessons, but he certainly knows how to drive.
Read between the lines. And when you head to your Lamborghini dealership, tell them the Technology Brothers sent you. Let's go to Lulu. She says, it's very hard for public company CEOs to state their unfiltered beliefs and principles. The pressures are immense. Among public co's, it's basically Toby Lutke, Brian Armstrong, and Elon Musk holding the Overton window open. Yeah, we talked about this with the fuck you money post from Mark Andreessen. Like, you get so entrenched that saying any unfiltered belief or principle could slice your customer base or your employee base or your investor base. Like, you have like thousands and thousands.
Well, it's more so they're hovering over. They draft a post. They're hovering over the post button.
The weight.
And then they're thinking, oh, this, pension fund or institutional investor owns 4% of my company, and I'm going to immediately get an email saying, "Hi, Mark. Let me know if you can talk."
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, great. But I think the key here, so the interesting thing about the examples that Lulu gave is the approaches are dramatically different. Elon very clearly seems to just say whatever he's thinking off the top of his head. Be liberal with emojis. Like, I don't think he has like posts are not the opinions of any of my companies. It's like, no, his posts are the opinions of his companies. And then Toby is the opposite approach of like seemingly very intentional, like sort of using his megaphone as like, it's very curated. It's not on the fly. And so both ways work.
And Brian too. Brian writes a long post, very thoughtful. He puts a lot of work into it, but he's not afraid to be unfiltered and
controversial.
I
don't even know if unfiltered is the right, like, the best thing is to be you can be controversial but be filtered and tasteful in the delivery of that.
And message. I do wonder if this is going to change as more companies go public, because public company CEOs, okay, well, what happens when Anduril goes public, or what happens when there are a lot of founder-led companies right now that just aren't public yet, but it'll probably be easier for them to maintain their unfiltered nature than retrain a generation of public company CEOs.
It's interesting to think about the X long post and how that's kind of changed the platform from a communication standpoint. Because if you historically you wanted to share a lot, you had to post a thread, but then somebody could screenshot one tweet and be like, look, this guy hates this type of people. But then now in a long post, it's like it would be more disingenuous context to not show the full context based on one thing that they said. So it actually opens it up.
Yeah, it's great. Santiago, been on the show before. He says, you can just not do psychedelics, lol.
Bold statement, Cotton, and very true. We support this message. Just because psychedelics are popular in Silicon Valley does not mean you have to do them. Doesn't even mean that you're going to benefit from them. I think we've maybe talked about this on the show, but psychedelics can provide this novel experience that makes people feel like it's super monumental, and maybe that they just hadn't put their phone down for a while. It's like a lot of people, the only time they go for a long hike is when they're taking LSD. Wow. So they're like, oh, this is amazing. But you could just like take the hike.
The best metaphor was that post we read about I took so many psychedelics that at a certain point I had a meta epiphany that the drug was just leaning on the epiphany key in my brain, and it was just making me think, I'm having an epiphany, I'm having an epiphany, I'm having an epiphany. And that's actually not having an epiphany. And that same thing happens with a lot of cannabis, where it's like, oh, everything was so funny last night. Oh, tell me the jokes that you were laughing at. Not funny at all. Only funny in the moment because it was completely synthetic. And so, you want to stay away from that.
And I've talked about this before, but when I was in college, Tim Ferriss was directly or indirectly massively promoting psychedelic, like basically as like a lifestyle to one of the biggest podcasts in the world, just telling everybody like how great psychedelics are. And I think that that's irresponsible. I think it's something that can be done, in small circles, but doesn't need to be on a megaphone.
I agree.
It's degenerate.
I agree. Let's go to Bryce. He says, we're in multiple golden ages at once, quoting Jeff Bezos from this fantastic interview that Bezos did. That there's a great breakdown on David Senra's X page, and he did a whole deep dive on it. Got reshared by Ivanka Trump, I believe. And it got reshared by
Jeff
Bezos'
wife.
That's right, Lauren
Yeah.
Sanchez. But I agree with this. Multiple golden ages at once. We're doing space travel. We're doing AI. We're doing bio. There are a ton of things
We're doing
going
Doge.
on. Doge, making the government
Innovation
more efficient.
in government.
It is a fantastic time to be alive. I just like that he put this quote out there. It's great.
Thank you, Bryce.
Thank you. Let's go to Andrew Reed. That's over at Sequoia. He says, although he doesn't have the tag anymore, I got to check that he's still there. He says, never make the same mistake twice. Make it at least 3 or 4 times so you're absolutely sure you're wrong, then change your approach. I like it.
So I've had this with people
Yeah.
like early in my career, not even that long ago.
Yep.
I would start talking with somebody maybe about investing or partnering in some capacity or a hire, and I would have like a little something in the back of my head that wasn't a really strong, intense sort of intuition, but there was some intuition that that there was some red flag. And over the last like 2 years, I've really tried to be intentional about listening to that.
Yep.
And I had to make the mistake of not listening to it 4 or 5 times.
Totally.
And so now when it happens, I know what kind of comes after making that mistake. So I'm just like, I'm just not going to even start,
Yeah. It's almost hard to make the mistake once and fully learn the lesson.
Yeah, you need multiple data points
Yep.
to prove out a real thesis there.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine in high school. I think we were in college, and one of his younger brothers came out with everyone partying, and his younger brother was like drinking, like trying to keep up with the college guys. And one of our friends, the older brother is like, "Hey, take it easy. Like, we are college guys. Like, you're just not gonna be able to keep up with us. Our tolerance is like way higher. You got to go easy." And one of our other friends just like grabs the older brother's hand and says like, "Look, some lessons have to be learned the hard way."
Yeah.
And to this day, he referred to this as like Des lessons, because like that's the type of like lesson learned the hard way. And he had a terrible night.
Alcohol is a very positive feedback loop. It
Yeah.
is a poison.
Yes,
So
it is
people
a poison.
consume it, they feel good, but then they feel really bad.
Really
and
bad.
It creates less desire to do it again, even
Yeah.
though you might feel good for a little bit.
Yeah, hopefully. So yeah, some things you got to learn the hard way. Let's go to Justin Mayers, brother of the week this week. He says the FDA literally has a 10-second rule. If a company fries something in oil for less than 10 seconds, there's no requirement to add the oil to the ingredient label. Reform can't come soon enough. Fascinating. Yeah, the FDA has a bunch of these weird rules, just like little archaic things that get
You've dealt with
exploited.
more than most.
Tons of weird stuff that just like this has to be on, this can't be on. I mean, there's a ton of stuff in the tobacco industry where you like because the cigarette companies were making claims about like low tar. Now you can't even make a claim about any tobacco product, including a tobacco-free product, that it's sugar-free or it doesn't contain seed oils or it doesn't contain microplastics. Like, you legally cannot make those claims, even if it's true. And it's just like super hard.
Is that regulatory capture?
Basically, yeah, for the cigarette companies.
Yeah.
Every
So
law
like
about
you can't
cigarettes-
you can't market product benefits against us.
Oh yeah, I mean, like the whole backlash against the tobacco companies was just like a masterclass in like jujitsu and getting a good outcome. Everything was like, oh yeah, you'll totally tie our hands on this and also create the strongest monopoly in American history. Oh yeah, well yeah, no one will be able to advertise. Who would that benefit? The entrenched incumbents?
Yeah,
absolutely.
with crazy distribution.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
durable brand value.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So every decision that they made was just like very long-term focused it was a long-term win for the tobacco companies and a short-term win for the health
regulators.
Yeah, regulators. And so they got to say, hey, there's no more cigarette ads. It's like, okay, well, let's see how this plays out. Will people still be smoking in 40 years? Absolutely.
Yeah. My take with I had no idea about this rule, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
But I think you basically, if you're not consuming foods that you watched being made, or you just assembled the ingredients and made that yourself, it is just default going to be less good for you than that, right? Like there's no amount of, it's gluten-free or it's seed oil-free or it was made with beef tallow. Like all that stuff like sort of matters, but then, there was lead in the process. And now it has whatever. So anyways,
rough.
If you're really optimizing for health, it's got to be whole foods.
Let's go to Boring Business. He's quoting someone who says, is there a job where they just pay you for being a chill guy with good intuition about stuff? And Boring Business says, venture capital. Great post.
I had the post today about like everybody wants to be a VC. Why wouldn't you want to just be an LP?
Yeah.
You know, you just that's also a chill job. You just
Very
get to
chill.
meet VCs, hang out.
Yep.
Ski resorts, go cat skiing, heli skiing, you know, deploy a little capital, sit back, watch it work. But yeah, I do think if you it's funny, ideas guys, you know, monetize well through just building companies. But there's a lot of VCs that are ideas guys, and they basically just sit on this this like basket of really good ideas for years and wait for the right entrepreneur to come to them and say, hey, I'm going to build this thing. And they're like, oh, I've thought about this for a long time. This is great. Now I'll give you money to do it. And I get to watch my, your vision kind of play out.
Yeah. Let's do a promoted post.
Let's do a promoted post from our friends over at Montclair. We've talked about this at length. Ski season is in full effect. And Montclair says, Diamond Run, extraordinary layers for every angle of mountain life. Explore Grenoble Fall Winter 2024 at montclair.com. So Montclair proving that they are excellent posters here. They're putting a link in, even though they know it's going to hurt them in the algorithm. But this jacket that they're showing off is so fantastic that I'm sure it'll still do numbers. It's great post from Montclair. And if you get invited to go cat skiing, heli skiing, or have a more humble, you know, if a VC says, hey, do you want to come up to Aspen and, you know, we'll ski at the resort. If you get more modest VC like that,
grit your teeth and go anyway.
Any of those environments, Montclair would be a good fit. So thank you to Montclair.
It's fantastic. Let's go to Vittorio. Let's stay on the topic of things with pockets. He says a lawyer in your pocket.
There we go.
He's showing that with Grok 3, court cases are being added to the training set, aiming to provide Grok with the ability to offer compelling legal verdicts. Pretty exciting.
So this
a lot of companies stay away from this.
Yeah, so this is going to be already when people talk about what's wrong with America, it's the lawfare that's just constantly being waged.
Yep.
It's good business for one reason why it's great to be a lawyer in this country for the most part, but it's going to be really insane when these sort of consumer AI products, and Do Not Pay was an early version of this, but it was less like I'm going to sue somebody and more like we're giving you the tools to kind of fight back against different laws that maybe you don't, or like work with laws. And there's a world in the future where Grok can launch a lawsuit for you against one of your ops. And it's just 10 times like most of what stops people from launching lawsuits is the cost of the lawsuit. You know, if you have some type of dispute, let's say you're disputing over $10,000, it doesn't make sense to enter into a lawsuit because it's going to cost you $100,000 to even get to any type of conclusion, or maybe more. So when that cost goes to zero, what happens?
I do wonder where the Nash equilibrium will be for all this, because yes, there's a world where it gets a lot easier to sue people, but then the AI should also be used to defend people. And so you'll have all of these lawsuits that are kind of being fought by AI and don't really bubble up. Well, this is a real thing.
We should create a data center just for the bullshit lawsuits.
Oh,
and
it's
just
going to be
huge. Put them out in like, you know.
There's this has already been happening for years in legal billing. So there's software that companies use to read through bills from law firms to determine what was a billable hour and what wasn't, so they can effectively redline the invoices when they come through and say, oh, this was just like an associate reading case law. That's their homework. That's not something that's billable. So we want to pay you 25% less. And if you save 25% on your bills with your massive law firm and your Fortune 500, like that's a huge amount of money. But then the law firms got the software too, and then when they submit their bills, it goes through a review and says, okay, what's going to get thrown back at us? Let's not put that on the bill. And so it just became this like, you know, equilibrium fight of like the AIs essentially. And the result is that like I think just as many hours get billed, but now there's a tax from the AI, from the tech companies on both sides.
Love that.
That'll probably continue. Anyway, let's go to Isaiah Taylor. He says, guys, I've had enough. I'm leaving X and heading to the other app. I'll still post occasionally and like and RT my friends' content to be supportive of them. Reply to a few comments, a scroll here and there, perhaps, a rare DM. But trust me, my heart will be in the other app.
Boom.
Banger.
Shots fired at
Such
Cuban.
Such a good. This is a Cuban. I was thinking Jan LeCun, but it just generally.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
it's
applicable to many different types of people who are.
No, the conversation's still happening on X, baby.
Yeah,
it's not going anywhere.
Can't give it up. It's the greatest
Network
app of all time.
I tried to log into Blue Sky to see, like, okay, has anyone actually moved over? And it was pretty minimal over there, pretty sparse. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny that if you're building any products that you want to get in front of the sort of tech audience, tech elite, whatever you want to call it, you still got to be on X to promote it.
Yeah. Let's go to Zach Weinberg. He says, the trend that confuses me most as a tech angel investor is the juxtaposition of A, incredibly cool new AI-driven seed stage ideas with B, early stage valuations that do not make economic sense given C, increasing competition from everywhere. Great time to be a customer though. And then he goes on to say, it's become so easy to be a seed stage software founder with all the incredible tools out there. Top of funnel ideas is huge. Prototypes are increasingly easy and cheap to build. Will be interesting to see how VC returns work in an environment like this.
Yeah, this is the bull case for Y Combinator right now because they have a set structure to their investments.
They've
and you
held
can't
their
negotiate
valuation.
it.
Yeah.
And so they are able to buy into companies effectively artificially low because of their program and brand. And then everybody else has to pay a premium once they are a part of that program. Yeah. So big bull case for YC. I did see recently, I was pitched by a company that was started by some guys that had started a big consumer tech company in the sort of early Facebook era. Mm-hmm. They were coming back for a new AI infrastructure product. They told me we're, it's going to be done at 60 posts. We're just waiting on terms. And then I just heard yesterday it got done at 12 posts.
Whoa.
So there is some
pushback on that.
There's some pushback, but still the super crack teams are still getting these egregious valuations out the gates.
Yeah. I mean, 60 posts, that's going to be a $10 million round. That's you're just a 50-person company on day one. It's almost working against you.
Yeah.
Because there's just burning a hole in your pocket and you're going to have an overly large team for hunting for that product market fit.
But those rounds, I mean, they're happening.
Yeah, unless you really have CapEx that you need, whether it's R&D or some sort of data center build out, you really got to think through that. Does your business need that much to get from 0 to 1? It's a big question.
But I think it's some weird thing. It's even second time founders are drawn more because they're used to measuring themselves by numbers. If you start a company and you get to $50 million run rate and sell it, then when you go back to square one, you're like, oh yeah, it'd be pretty nice to have 10 million in the bank because I've spent this much money before effectively, but it's much different to go and spend it from 0 to 1 to do that versus spending your Series A in your last company.
It's also just extremely jolting to go from a company that you're building where you have teams for everything and then you go into seed stage and you're like, wait, I have to do this stuff myself or I only have a person instead of a team. Everything's it feels like it's maybe kind of moving slower. It can be
I had one. I mean, part of what happens is, I just think this is pretty relevant. Part of what happens is you get a really smart team that goes out and they have a good idea, good team, and they go, yeah, we're going to raise $4 million. And then one of these bigger multi-stage funds just goes, well, okay, we really want to lead you around. We love what you're doing. We want to own at least 12% or whatever, 14, 15%. And then they're like, we'll give you 8 on 40. And then the founder's like, well, it's objectively wrong for me to turn this money down in many ways if I can get way more resources for the same level of dilution. And then all the smaller investors and the angels, I've invested in multiple rounds over the last 12 months where I'm like, this price doesn't make any sense, but I want to be in the company because it's my friend. And
and it can be so hard because it's like, okay, so then you could push down the amount of dilution, but then your valuation's still high and you have to clear that hurdle for the next round, or you push down the valuation and then you get diluted more, and it's just like all tension everywhere. It can be very, very, very fraught. But just got to go get the engine humming on the building and build something. So let's go to Molly O'Shea. She's been on the show before. She says, coming off a week of holiday events, and I couldn't feel more optimistic and grateful for LA's unique tech community. Everyone is crushing it. 2025 is going to be incredible. I love it. Just an optimistic post to end on. Maybe we should do one more, but
we should do one more.
No,
I do love the optimism. LA's tech ecosystem gets so much
hate, but it's great.
Shit. But one of the reasons I'm grateful for it is we were connected because somebody was like, "You're the two people in LA's tech world that I actually really like, and like you guys should meet each other." And that was like basically the whole reason we got connected.
It's a small world out here, and I don't know. There's some benefits. Like there's plenty of events. We saw a ton of people. People fly in. It's close to San Francisco.
People are happy to travel to LA.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
there's a lot
it's
to
fun.
do here. Weather's always good. But it's not so
great holiday parties,
and it is spread out enough that you're not getting like it's not come to this partiful every single day, and like the FOMO is not nearly as bad here.
I get partifles every week that I'm just like, I'm not going to drive an hour.
Yeah, exactly.
Just no way.
No one in LA has really understood that it's like Europe.
Yeah,
it's like no, I'm not going to
LA is
the
most
Germany of Los Angeles,
yeah.
aka Santa Monica.
You want to go to France tomorrow?
That's Malibu, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's significant to get around here. Well, let's go to some boom news. Blake Scholl has announced a new fundraising round. As XB1 approaches Mach 1, I'm happy to share that Boom Aero has raised $100 million in new financing, fully funding the first Symphony engine prototype. And Paul Graham says, I invested more in Boom than I've ever invested in a startup before, but this company is important for America. They'll also make a huge amount of money if they succeed. No one else is anywhere near having a supersonic airliner. So I think we got to hit the size gong a bit
size gong
for the $100 million round. But this was very rough. This was a down round. This was a recap. I believe it was 100 million on 100 million pre. So the new investors took about 50% of the company. But it's sad for all the early investors and probably some of the employees that got diluted. But it's great that Silicon Valley has kind of rallied the troops and said, circle the wagons. We want this to be a thing, and we're keeping it in business, and we're keeping the story going. It's better than just washing our hands of this.
It would be absolutely tragic. Like, for example, if China had a company like this, they just wouldn't let it fail. Like there'd be like a government intervention to say this technology is critical enough that we're going to just make it work at whatever the cost.
That's literally the story of TSMC. That's literally the story of TSMC. Could not fail because it had the backing of the Taiwan government. They were like, this is critical.
Yeah, and so I'm really glad to see it, and that's like a beautiful. It's created a beautiful moment out of an otherwise sort of unfortunate set of circumstances to see a bunch of the most successful, influential people in the Valley say this company is too important to fail. Let's make it happen.
Should we take a moment of silence for the early investors who got wiped out and crammed down?
Yeah.
This moment of silence is brought to you by Bose Quiet Comfort headphones. Find your moment of silence at bose.com. Okay.
All right, and back to the show.
Back to the show. Should we close with Databricks? This is a real size gong moment.
Real size gong
Databricks
moment.
is on track to raise a $9.5 billion round at a $60 billion valuation.
Feast or famine, baby.
This is amazing.
Let's go.
We should do one gong for every billion that you raise.
Yeah, we need
nine gongs for this. This is fantastic. I don't know enough about Databricks. We should do a deep dive on the company, break it all down. I know that they're doing very well. Everyone's excited, and it's very, very cool. And the founder is available and does podcasts, and I've seen him at conferences and stuff. And he's probably under discussed because it's one of these B2B database companies that's a little bit not sexy or consumery. But I love that he's out there talking, and they have some really cool investors, and I'm really excited to see where this goes. So should we close with one more promoted post?
I love ending on an ad.
Yeah.
Because if there's one thing brothers love, it's ads.
Yep.
And I got a good one for you today.
Fantastic.
We have a 2021 Mercedes-Benz AMG Black Series. These are
Grail.
This is a Grail car. I mean, this is like one of the last like truly great cars Mercedes has made.
Oh, me? I just drive a Mercedes. I just have a Mercedes.
You just have a Mercedes.
Yeah, I commute in a Mercedes.
Yeah,
just happens to be an AMG Black Series.
Yeah.
It's probably got a sub 7-minute Nürburgring.
Yeah, sub 7. And this mean AMG is finished in one of 16 graphite gray Magno over black exclusive Napa leather, and what a great spec. I mean, the full the Batman Black Series doesn't really get better than that. And go pick this up. If you're still listening to the show, you love ads, which means you probably have an extra $415,000 laying around.
Yeah.
Go buy this car.
You know what you need? Upgrade that Metris Black Series.
Yeah.
They made the R63, which was the AMG minivan.
Yeah.
6.3 liter.
That's a real grail.
V8.
That's dads like us, that's a grail.
That's a grail. There's only like 50 of them in the US.
I know.
They're not that expensive.
Really?
But yeah. They're just like, they're so weird. And they don't even have the sliding doors.
Now I need to go. Look.
This is a grail car as well. But go to Mercedes and say, I'm equivalent to the Sultan of Brunei. I want a custom Metris AMG Black Series. Put a V8 in that thing.
Wow, one just sold on Bring a Trailer.
How much?
R63
60?
for $39,000.
$40K for a minivan?
I mean, steal.
Why would you get a Honda Odyssey when you could have a 6.3 liter V8?
What an insane car.
It's so insane when you hear the engine note on that thing. You pull up to the school, dropping off the kids, 0 to 60 in sub 4.
Get it lowered.
It's great. So AMG GT Black Series for the weekends and the daily, but when you're dropping off the kids, the R63, we recommend them both. Sometimes when you sponsor the podcast, we'll promote the main thing, but we'll promote your whole catalog.
Yep.
Yeah.
We love multi-product companies.
Yeah.
More products to promote. And that's a good place to end, folks. Thank you for listening. It's been a great week.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic week.
Brothers.
Merry Christmas. And thanks for listening. Subscribe on X, subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Please leave us 5 stars. Add on Spotify. We have video up there now. YouTube. There's short form. There's long form. Any different thing
All different
want.
forms. And we're coming to LinkedIn soon, folks.
Get ready.
It's a big, bold move. And everybody said, "Oh, you guys don't have what it takes to hang on LinkedIn.
Could never do it.
It's a different ball game over here.
Don't do
coming
it.
to the big leagues of professional networking." But we're gonna go over there. We're gonna make a statement.
We are,
and we're gonna bring those people back to X. Just the base ones. We'll bring them back to X.
Yep.
And we'll sort of help them find their footing over here.
So stay tuned. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye.